Hello and welcome to what will hopefully be a brief and relatively hiccup-free process of making a pair of 18th century stays. I know there are many videos like this one online already, but honestly, as someone who's learned like 90% of their sewing skills off the internet, I'm always glad to have different examples when I'm curious about something in particular. I'm using a pattern from the 1750s taken from Nora Wall's corsets and crinolines. I'm using some red brocade as the outer fabric and 2 layers of linen as the innermost structural part. I won't be using synthetic baleen for boning, but this plastic cable, which is for feeding wires through walls. I have no idea what it's called in English. Anyways, it's much cheaper than plastic boning and takes curves really well. The rest of the supplies consist of white embroidery thread to hand sew the panels together and green thread for the eyelets, while polyester ribbon will be used for both binding and lacing the stays because it's pretty and I want to get rid of it because it's been there for ages. Now this is what the corset will look like, except for a few alterations here and there. It has front and back lacing and a separate stomacher, and I've already fine-tuned the pattern with a mock-up out of 2 layers of linen and a pair of horrible zip ties at centre front, which you will see right about now.
Alright, so first mock-up is done, and it will probably be the only one because it fits basically perfectly. It fits just fine. I scaled the pattern up 5.5 times, and my measurements are 72 centimeters to the waist and 92 centimeters around the bust, and that proportion worked out just fine for me. And the pattern actually doesn't reduce my waist at all, and I'm very fine with that. It looks better. Actually, it adds 1 centimeter, so it's 73 centimeters now, and oh look, it's just pushed everything down into the sides and up, and no crushed organs or broken bones or, ooh, look at that. Corsets aren't torture devices. Who would have known? Anyways, few alterations will be made, I guess, on the new pattern. The tabs hit a little too low, so I've split them up higher because I have a very short torso. And could have, restarted the pattern, but I will not be bothered starting over again. So I've just split them up a little higher. I will take about 2 centimeters off the front panel and of the stomacher because it's a bit too high and my boobs don't come up where they should. I will also be adding 10 centimeters to the shoulder straps because broad shoulders, and they are a bit, I don't like them this short. I'm sure they would be fine, but I prefer them a little longer. And because I have a wide back, I have added 4 centimeters to the back and did not include back lacing because I can't be bothered to hand sew that many eyelets. I will not. Anyways, looks good. It will be very nice, and I'm very happy. Yay.
After modifying the pattern, it's time to trace it out on the first layer of linen and mark all of the tabs and boning channels and such. The next step is putting the 2 layers of linen together. I didn't really take any particular time to study the proper grain line because I'm a heathen, so all of the pieces are just cut out on the straight of grain, and it worked out just fine in the end. The pieces are cut out, leaving a very large seam allowance all around. There is no need to measure it because it will be folded under anyways and felled once the boning is in, and the stays will be assembled according to historical practice. Thank God. The linen layers are then basted to the outer fabric. The print is very busy, but I still took care of the grain line so the light doesn't hit it differently in different spots, it doesn't hit it weirdly. And the fabric is also cut out with large seam allowances for 2 reasons. First of all, when stitching the channels in, all of the fabric is going to shift a little, no matter how well they are pinned together. Secondly, brocade frays like hell, so it's good to have lots of extra space and wiggle room to avoid risking anything. The channels are sewn in a zigzag up-down pattern, starting from the centermost seam and working outwards so the fabrics stretch and warp evenly, and then back stitching at the end of every line. The tab boning will be inserted from the bottom and the rest of it from the top, so the only thing that can be stitched in at the moment to prevent the bones from moving around is the line at the waist, and once all of the boning is in, the pattern pieces will be stitched all around. Boning can be positioned in one of two ways. The dumb way, or the smart way, and cutting it a centimetre shorter than the channel and making sure to file each end well so it doesn't poke through the fabric. Now do this over and over and over and over and over again for all the pattern pieces and the stomacher. The stays will be half boned, which means I'll be skipping every other channel. The only downside to using the cable instead of plastic whalebone is the need to press it with an iron once it's inside. However, it is much smaller and closer to the shape of reeds, which were actually often used in corset and stay making instead of whalebone. For the tabs, I used regular plastic baleen because I had some left over and I really wanted to get rid of it. After sewing the boning channel shut, the pieces are thoroughly ironed and I can begin trimming away the extra fabric. I'll only be trimming the sides which will be sewn together at the moment, so neither the tabs nor the top and bottom edges, which will be split and bound at the very last moment. The fabric is trimmed in such a way the brocade is the longest layer, the middle linen piece is the second longest layer, and the outer linen is the shortest, so turning the edges around doesn't create as much bulk. The edges are then pinned down and secured with a double row of whip stitches in white embroidery thread. This is what the pieces look like, all nice and set. Now it is time for the eyelets. The corset is spiral lace, so the eyelets will be offset instead of parallel to each other. Each eyelet is poked through with embroidery scissors and widened with an awl, which also gives it the proper rounded shape. The eyelet is then stitched around with 3 strands of embroidery thread in 2 different colours because I like it. And once it is done, the thread is knotted and buried in the back. It is finally time to stitch the pieces together. They are faced wrong sides together and sewn spiraling 2 strands of embroidery thread round and round and round through all the layers of fabric. A pair of pliers really does come in handy now. These stitches should be strong and dense and not necessarily pretty, as they will be covered in tape before the tabs are bound. This is what the corset looks like from the inside once it is all stitched together. The last step before binding the edges is covering the seams in ribbon, as the raw edges of this ribbon will be encased in the binding with the rest. The ribbon is sewn on with whip stitches, and I have absolutely no idea what was going on with my thumb there. I guess the mystical and magical wonders of working with power tools on a daily basis or whatever. I have no footage of the actual binding, I'm afraid, as I decided to do it in the park. It was one of the last nice days of October, and I do love sewing outside, and it was sunny and pretty and beautiful. So why not? This project began in August, but many things happened in the meantime, and I haven't found the time to edit what I filmed until now, basically. So the extra fabric is cut as close to the stitching line as possible, and at the last possible moment to avoid fraying, and the ribbon is whip stitched on from both sides. That was the last step, which means the stays are done, which means I could get dressed. In the end, green ribbon was a bit much, so I used red ribbon instead. I am enormously proud of how this turned out. I love it so much, and I hope it was useful to somebody. If anybody has any tips or tricks to share, please do. It makes me really happy. And that's it, really. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas.